Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Last week, U.S. President Donald Trump appeared to throw a wrench into Iran's strategic deliberations when he sounded willingness to negotiate a new nuclear deal with the Islamic Republic. Also, should this effort fail, he may even be open to supporting an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear facilities. Whatever Iran's position, either a dash towards their first weapons or trading their threshold status for sanctions relief, this must now be reevaluated. Joining us to assess the state of play, all the way from the United States, is Mr. David Albright, who is the president of the Institute for Science and International Security. It's good to have you with us, sir.
Good to be here.
Absolutely. Also joining us from elsewhere in the United States is Dr. Olli Heinonen, formerly the International Atomic Energy Agency's Deputy Director General and a distinguished fellow at the Stimson Center at Washington, D.C. It's great to have you with us, Olli.
Thank you for having me.
As ever, with us here in the studio, TV7's editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Amir, complicated days ahead. Set a stage for us.
So the administration is being staffed. The National Security Advisor, who does not need confirmation, has been there for a week or more. And we have the Secretary of State, Rubio, and the Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, being confirmed and starting to work. And what President Trump needs to do vis-a-vis Iran is twofold. He must have some idea regarding his nuclear policy in general, the nuclear posture of the United States, the policy vis-a-vis Chinese nuclear efforts, Russia, especially as long as the war in Ukraine goes on, North Korea. And the other track, which he must consider, is his policy vis-a-vis Iran. Of course, these two converge when we speak about Iran's nuclear project. So it's too soon, and obviously in Tehran, they are waiting every word of his. Sometimes it's shooting from the hip or from the lip, as it is sometimes said. There is no policy paper. There have not been any deliberations, but the stage is being set for what could be at least feelers sent towards Iran.
Well, President Trump used the word nice. It would be nice if such a deal would be reached. Nevertheless, he maintains all options on the table. And there was quite an interesting interview by Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic, to American media outlet, something that, of course, is part of the Iranian campaign to somehow manipulate decision makers
and
in Washington.
Netanyahu is supposed to meet with Trump very soon.
And they're speaking about next week for that
So
meeting.
Obviously Iran would be top of the agenda.
Absolutely. Well, let's turn to our distinguished guests. I'd like to start with you, Mr. Albright. When we're talking about Iran's nuclear portfolio, let's start with characterizing at what state are we currently at?
Well, I think the situation with being able to make weapon-grade uranium is very clear, that Iran can make sufficient quantities for several bombs very quickly if it decided to do so, and I think it will probably do so by denying access to the inspectors, and then doing it in secret, or it could actually just start making it under safeguards, which would push them closer to reducing the timeline to build the bomb. Now, how long do they need to build the bomb is an assessment, and we have our own, others have theirs. We think it's going to take them many months to make a crude nuclear device. I mean, that's from start to end. In the middle, they may be making, or toward the end of that time period, maybe making the weapon grade uranium. But we still think they have some steps to overcome, some components to make, and for some small scale facilities to finish. It'd take longer to make a warhead for a missile, but I think they certainly succeed. So I think the timeframes have shrunk. Our information is that some of the Iranian who were in the old, what's called the Ahmad plan program of the early 2000s, who work for this entity called SPND, have started working at old Ahmad facilities on things involving high explosives and sensitive activities. So it could be that some of the scientists, engineers are just getting ready, honing their skills or looking at solving some of the remaining challenges. One of the things that further complicates the estimate of a timeline is that our information is that these people doing this do not have the approval of the supreme leader or the top regime leadership, and so it appears they, on their own initiative, have started doing these activities. So I think we're in a very, very dangerous situation, and the timelines are shrinking, and the part on weaponization suffers from a shortage of solid information.
Very interesting point about the fact that the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is not in the loop pertaining to this. I will investigate this further, obviously, since I was not aware of that. I'm always under the impression that he knows that whatever is happening under his sphere, and that is whatever is happening in the Islamic Republic, ultimately is under his command and his final say. But it does make sense since the Ahmad program, as we know, also with the Israeli strike on the 26th of October of last year, the Palchin nuclear facility, at least one area of that facility was struck, where in the past it was part of the Ahmad program, and it seems to be that it was active, particularly in contending with various scientific research and testing of the ballistic missiles themselves and the capacity of transiting the payloads of nuclear weapon through the various degrees, or transiting through that into whatever destination they intend. But Dr. Heinonen, I'd like to hear your take on this. To what degree do you see it in the same light, and where do we have the nuances of the various schools of thought?
Well, I think that our problem really is that what happened after 2023, 2003, when Ahmad program was, or plan was suspended, and what did these people do after that when they went to various institutes, some of them universities, many of them associated with the Revolutionary Guards. And we know from the public records from Iran that they used to meet. Mr. Abbasi Davani has been very vocal to that end and has said that from time to time these people met with Mr. Fakhrizadeh. So I don't think that they spoke about weather. They must have been talking something which is relevant to this. And at the same time, if we recall the documentation from Ahmad plan, when this was suspended, they decided that certain activities continue so that they can maintain their skills. And the question is what they have been really doing since then. And we need also to remember that this weapon design, or part of it, which they got from Russian person, was not a very simple one. It was more advanced than, for example, the Chinese one which A.Q. Khan shared with Libya and others. So the real thing is that, as also Mr. Danilenko mentioned in one of the interviews, that he was not the only Russian who worked in Tehran. That what really happened after 2003, how far they have got, and is this what, for example, Mr. Salehi says that when he compares it to the car nuclear weapon, that if you have all the components of the car, you can one day assemble it very quickly. And this is what the United States of America did, with the Hiroshima bomb. The only thing which was missing from the bomb at the very end was the high-enriched uranium. Fine. And then let's go to quickly to some aspects of the weaponization. First of all, I don't think that we have in public all the information which was on those Ahmad or nuclear archives, because it's a sensitive information, and I don't think that it's appropriate from the Israeli or US point of view to disclose it too much, because it will also expose their knowledge when they combine it with other information, what's happening inside Iran on these issues, if anything happens. So we have to look this situation from that point of view. And then very quickly, uranium metallurgy, not likely a problem. They got a very good documentation from Mr. Khan. They manufactured, I think it was close to 200 kilograms of various uranium metal compounds in before 2003. So I think that these people know how to do alloying and machining. So this is not going to be a stumbling block. And as David just said, produce high-enriched uranium is a matter of days or a week for the first couple of weapons. So that's not the problem. What about the rest? Let's take the high explosives. IAEA has explained its concerns of these detonators. Iran can produce HMX, which is one high explosive which is used for nuclear weapons. They had an opening video from the factory which produced it. People don't know how much is the capacity, but it's a scale of a couple of 100 tons. So there is more than enough that material. TATP, which is another compound which might be more safer to use. One doesn't know, but I think that people are of the opinion that they have a small capability to produce it. So such kind of material. So that all those components and electronics are available. And then we go back to the IAEA verification system, which people very often forget. What is the timeliness for uranium enrichment verification? Like also for plutonium. It's 1 month. What does this 1 month means? When the IAEA safeguards approach was created in 1960s, late 60s and early 70s, that 1 month was time which was thought at that point of time for a country which plans to break out and build a nuclear weapon, time required not only to produce high-enriched uranium or plutonium, but turn it to metal and metal components. For that one, it was felt in that point of time that 1 month is required. Then if you look that, then we can start to think how long it will take for Iran to assemble a nuclear weapon if they had all those components tested and on the shelf. So it's not half a year or 1 year as some people postulate. I think that from the risk assessment point of view, much shorter periods should be considered. And I would not go much beyond 1 month to be on the safe side for the first crude nuclear weapon. And testing, I also refer to the testing of nuclear weapons, that you can do a lot of things on the cold tests, which we don't know very much how much they have done in Iran. And here I refer to Pakistan and those 25 locations where they did cold testing before 1998 to make sure that those 6 nuclear devices, including the miniaturized one, worked. So this is, I think, what the intelligence knows some of it, but this is the risk assessment which the international community has in front of it. Now, when we go to the last miles of the JCPOA snapback provision, which has only about 10 months to trigger if it is triggered, and one has to remember one more thing. It requires certain consultations. The provisions of snapback is not that you just walk to the meeting in UN Security Council and snap it back. You need to go through a due process, and I think that to be on the safe side, Germany, the UK and France has to do that. So time is of essence, and it's running, and I think that Mr. Trump and his administration know it.
Absolutely. Well, of
May I
course.
add, would you mind if I add something? Because I do think that Iran has several tasks to do before it can build a nuclear weapon, and I think the timeframes that we use, again, it's not the time frame from when they make weapon grade or start making weapon grade uranium, but from when they make the decision to build the bomb. I think those tasks are going to take them some number of months to finish. And from our information, they have not done this thing you mentioned, Olli, a cold test. I mean, it's possible they did, but it's just as possible that they didn't do the cold test. So they haven't convinced themselves with an experiment that the device will work. And so I think there's also some limited lifetime components. We think that the Telegon 2 facility may have held manufacturing equipment to make plastic explosives that are a key part of that go into the initiator of the main charge. But those plastic explosives have to be very pure, very highly pure in order to work in this overall initiator called a shockwave generator. And it could be that some of the equipment to make sure it was purified enough was destroyed. And this type of plastic explosive does not have a long shelf life. Probably the maximum time it can last is 5 years. And so I do think Iran does still have some challenges to face. And I think we have to be careful not to give them the benefit of the doubt in a sense, because if all we're looking at is a couple of weeks to a month after they start enriching to weapon grade, we're in a real bind about how to respond. And so I think if we are going to posit those kind of short timeframes, it should be based on what we know and not a worst case assessment.
Absolutely. Well,
that is
Mr.
risk assessment, which the government has to do.
Yeah,
not,
absolutely.
Not me to do. And I remind that those 25 code tests which were done by Pakistan, I think those took people by surprise.
Well, vigilance is key. That is something that must be put on the table, and we will shortly revert to our experts. But before that, Mr. Oren, 2 points that I think are very important to note. Something that Dr. Heinonen mentioned about the snapback. So the Europeans have until October to trigger a snapback mechanism that will ultimately have all of the sanctions under UN Security Council Resolution 2231 come into effect and then put Iran under maximum pressure that will force also Russia and China to play ball in this context. Of course, the question whether or not they'll do that is a different story. But nonetheless, we're talking here about a period where we hear during the Davos World Economic Forum conference, we heard IAEA Director General Rafael Mariano Grossi coming out and saying that he is very alarmed, as was also mentioned earlier, about the current state of Iran's 60% purity level enrichment, but also beyond that, we do see that he, according to the last instruction that he received at the Board of Governors meeting of the IAEA, was to follow up on a report that is necessary for the process in order to snap back those sanctions. But again, going back to the Russian angle and the Chinese angle, the Iranians and the Russians have now a strategic partnership signed by Masoud Pezeshkian, the president of Iran, and President Vladimir Putin of Russia, during the course of which one of the key components that the Iranians brought up is the need for help from Russia in bolstering, ratcheting up their nuclear capacity. Of course, they focus, at least publicly, on the peaceful nature of that program, but who knows to what degree their belligerence is in effect. What can you tell us about that? So,
just to go back for a second to what David Albright said in the beginning of the show regarding the possibility that Khamenei has not authorized and may not even know what is happening under his nose. We can take the analogy from other cases of which we in Israel are well aware of, non-nuclear. There are military and scientific bureaucracies with their own agendas, and they at least try to reach the proof of concept stage. They tell their masters, not necessarily the supreme leader, don't worry, we are just advancing until you want to stop us. We are not crossing the point of no return. And then sometimes someone doesn't understand that by okaying it, he is giving them the go-ahead to go even further, or else they want deniability. Khamenei may have told his subordinates, listen, I don't want to know. You go ahead, do what you need to do. I will later give you final instructions. And because of their proactive character, their assertive character, and they need to excel at what they do, regardless of the strategic implications. They are going ahead, and it may be too late.
Well, we have less than 6 minutes left for today's edition, and I'd like to ask both of you. I started today's edition with a question. Are the Iranians going to pursue, a bomb, or are they going to pursue diplomacy and succumb to various international pressures? And to what degree does President Trump going to pursue diplomacy over a kinetic strike to try and root out, at least delay, this Iranian aspirations for the long run? Dr. Heinonen, we'll start with you. In the long run, are we now in a point of no return, or is there still time for diplomacy?
I think that there's time for the diplomacy, and we have seen swift actions from President Trump in recent days that they may have an impact. But then we have to remember one thing, and people now want perhaps to compare this to Colombia, but the regime may also fight for its survival. And that may set the things very differently up. But on the other hand, I know that when I see the people who are working now with him, they are very knowledgeable about the nuclear issues. Many of them have fairly long experience, not only on Iran, but North Korea and how to deal with adversaries. So I think that they are ready for negotiation if Iran is ready for the negotiation. And we will see. It will be harsh talk like it was with North Korea during the previous administration, and North Korea decided not yet bite the bullet, and we see the result. And so Iran has the same dilemma in front of it. And the only thing I want to add, and one of the concerns of Mr. Grossi was that he feels that they don't know all the locations where these activities are done. They have not been able to interview the scientists at all. So there are a lot of unknowns in this picture. And then history tells that Iran never put all the eggs on one basket. Fordo was a good example. Construction started in 2004, just after the E3 agreement started to shake. So this is good to remember.
Absolutely. Mr. Albright?
Yeah, I certainly think there's time for diplomacy, but I think one of the things that the U.S. has to do, and I worry a little bit with Trump's mixed signals, is they have to make sure that Iran understands that however close they are to being able to build a nuclear weapon, if they are detected doing that or they divert enriched uranium, that military strikes will soon follow, and the United States will support Israel striking those facilities and being willing to strike again. I mean, I think history says one strike is usually never enough, but two strikes can, and the second strike may be aimed at the Iranian economy, oil production, for example. So I do think that if Iran is deterred from crossing the line and starts to fear more of moving forward, then I think negotiations have a greater chance of success. I do worry about what Olli said about North Korea. I mean, great fanfare on sitting down and talking sort of man to man, and it didn't work out well at all. And it does require the U.S. negotiators to be able to constrain President Trump and to put forward a negotiation strategy that has a greater chance of success and isn't dependent on this kind of personal interaction between two leaders. And I would add, in the Iranian context, it's even more complicated. Trump should be meeting with the supreme leader, not the president. The president's a figurehead in a sense on national security. But is Trump going to meet with the supreme leader? I'd be very surprised if he does.
Well, to be fair, I'm surprised if he does meet with the president either. So we'll have to wait and see how those developments, of course, progress. This is almost all the time that we have for today. In one sentence, Mr. Oren, do you see a reality in which Israel finds itself with the back against its wall and acts without the permission of the United States?
No, but even without being with the back to the wall, for Netanyahu domestically, it could be a good idea to divert attention from Gaza in a for-do for Philadelphia sort of formula. He will explain that Iran is existential, and therefore he needs Trump's approval. For that, he is willing to pay with a deal in Gaza.
Of course, there are plenty of people in the new administration, from State Department to DOD, all the way to the White House, who are clear-eyed about Iran's nuclear aggression by acting within the constraints, of course, of international fora. The West has been lagging behind for too long. But this is all the time that we have for today. I'd like to immediately thank Mr. Albright, Dr. Heinonen, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights. And I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom. For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at www.tv7israelnews.com.
Jerusalem Studio, now available on Spotify.